Hey everyone, I'd like to take a few moments on this Veterans Day to offer some words to America's veterans, and I want to go beyond merely thanking you for your service to our country and tell you how I will actually honor your service and draw from your knowledge and experience in my administration. After Vietnam, the nature of our military changed dramatically, and it became an all-volunteer force. Most of you volunteered out of patriotism and idealism, and 3/4 of you deployed more than once. You may not have agreed with all the policies that launched those wars that you served in, or maybe your views changed in the course of your service. But that impulse of sacrifice and selflessness and dedication is what we need to draw on today to turn our country around to fulfill its highest ideals. One of those ideals is of America the peaceful. More than 200 years ago, John Quincy Adams said, "America goes not abroad in search of monsters to destroy," but unfortunately, that is no longer true. I know that you did not join the armed forces to visit violence and mayhem around the world, but our nation's foreign policy establishment and the military-industrial complex has waged many questionable wars and has created global empire that generates endless crops of new enemies. Sometimes your patriotism and bravery have been exploited to serve goals contrary to our country's founding principle and your own values. When I'm in the White House, I'm going to return our military to its true function, which is to defend the American homeland. I won't send you abroad for regime change wars or oil wars. I will unwind the sprawling military empire that has deployed so many of you needlessly, and gradually shutter most of the 800 American bases around the world. To do that, I need your help. And that is why I'm going to convene a permanent Veterans Advisory Council with a seat on the National Security Council, so that veterans have a say in future decisions about war and peace. You who have sacrificed the most are among the best qualified to guide us. And I'll also draw on your experience to help me root out corruption in the defense industry and to make our military into a lean, efficient fighting force. Also, the Veterans Advisory Council will help me deliver the veterans' benefits that you deserve, to look out for your interests, and to prioritize the healing, the physical and psychological wounds that many of you received and still suffer. With your help, I'll be a peace president. You know better than anyone else the toll of war on both winners and losers. And I promise you, I'm going to do everything in my power as president to keep us out of war, except as a last resort, and only in defense of our nation on our national security interests. Thank you very much. Have a very, very happy and blessed Veterans Day, and God bless all of you. If you like this video and you want to learn more about me and the movement that we're building, please go to Kennedy24.com.
2024 presidential longshot candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr. made a stop in Maine today, holding a meet and greet at Ocean Gateway in Portland. People gathered this afternoon to see the environmental lawyer who announced his intentions to run for the White House earlier this year. And just about a month ago, he announced he's running as an independent. He's the 5th member of his family to seek office.
Brianna seems to have gotten into a little scuffle about free speech with Democrat-turned-independent candidate RFK Jr. Brianna, I'm just shocked to hear that you're feuding with someone on Twitter. It's really new behavior for you.
I wouldn't call it feuded, actually. He did seem to suggest he was open to further dialogue on this, so hopefully that happens. But for background, I called out RFK Jr., who has been a self-proclaimed champion of free speech, for tweeting in favor of sanctioning college students for their pro-Palestine speech and using threats to their post-grad employment opportunities as a cudgel to silence them. Now, RFK Jr. responded saying, "I support the freedom to express all protected speech. I encourage respectful discussions from all sides of the Gaza crisis. I don't support bullying, harassment, intimidation, and discrimination that has inspired fear in Jewish students and caused some to stop wearing yarmulkes on campus. The First Amendment does not protect such conduct on campus. Administration should crack down on it. I look forward to talking in person."
Well, the Libertarian Party also joined the fray, saying in a tweet, "We at the Libertarian Party support all speech, not just protected speech, whatever that means. Who decides what's protected and what isn't? Who decides what constitutes bullying, harassment, intimidation, and discrimination? Same government that locked us in our homes for months? No, thank you. Bobby, you're falling into the exact same trap that was used by your opponents in an attempt to silence you. Hopefully the overwhelming backlash that your reply has sparked will get you to rethink this terrible position you have taken." It's a pretty strong statement from the Libertarian Party, which in the past has applauded a lot of what RFK Jr. has had to say on lockdowns and COVID and other topics, although has been critical of him from the get-go on some of his really unlimited support for Israel. The Libertarian Party, many libertarians, myself included, just kind of oppose foreign aid as a general principle.
So to be clear, what we're talking about here is RFK Jr., he retweeted a tweet from Bill Ackerman. Now, Bill Ackerman's tweet is very long. He's the CEO of Pershing Square. He did one of these kind of essay format tweets that's very, very, very long. He talks about what he feels like is Harvard University's institutional failures to protect Jewish students. His own daughter graduated in 2020, and interestingly, in this screed, he says he asked her, what was anti-Semitism like on campus when you were there? And she said, non-existent. However, to him, that is evidence of an emerging crisis, not of a status quo of safety that I certainly experienced during my time there for Jewish students. I never heard any concerns or complaints along those lines. But if you get way, way down to the bottom of Bill Ackerman's post, he talks not just about what he thinks are generalized concerns at Harvard, which was fair and not necessarily implicating any free speech rights, but what he thinks needs to be done to Harvard students as a consequence. And this is where we get into the argument that I'm making that now RFK Jr., perhaps he didn't read to the bottom, but that he is tacitly endorsing this kind of behavior. So Bill Ackerman writes, because Harvard students are notoriously focused on their job and career prospects post-graduation, disciplinary actions by the administration for failure to meet the university's standards for appropriate conduct that become a part of the student's permanent record should serve as an effective deterrent to overt anti-Semitic acts on campus. No law firm, corporation, or graduate program will hire or admit an anti-Semitic or racist student, et cetera, et cetera. So he is endorsing in a way that Vivek Ramaswamy did not endorse the idea of using career threats, et cetera, as a cudgel to kiss down the line. Now, you might say, well, if they're legitimately anti-Semitic, then why do we care? Another problem with this article, this essay that Bill Ackerman posted, is that it's just him characterizing things as anti-Semitic, many of which specific instances have been disproven. For example, there was this argument that pro-Palestinian protesters were getting physical and like pushing away Israeli pro-Israel protesters. The reality was that there was a lie-in, like a die-in, that pro-Palestine protesters had done at Harvard Business School that then Israeli pro-Israel counter-protesters had come and started stepping over people and disturbing the people lying on the ground. And then the HBS pro-Palestinian students used like sheets so that they didn't come into contact with them as a protest technique to nonviolently try to usher them away from the folks that were lying on the ground trying to conduct a protest. So those kind of events were cited as evidence of anti-Semitism, as well as a subjective view, and I'm sensitive to this, people subjectively feeling unsafe, feeling like they don't want to wear their yarmulke or otherwise display that they're Jewish. I'm sorry that they feel that way, but is their subjective feeling a reason why we should have policies that punish students, especially when the definitions of anti-Semitism, as we've seen, have been so subjective?
Sure. I agree that, he says, RFK Jr. says bullying, harassment, intimidation, bad. Yeah, I think those things are bad.
And authority campus policy.
Whether they violate the First Amendment is another matter, and that's where I, unsurprisingly, since I am a member of the LP, we got to be really careful. The Supreme Court has drawn very clear lines, and a whole lot of speech is protected. It has to really rise to a level of threats of violence, specific plans for violence before the speech becomes unprotected. Now, certainly, if Harvard can also implement policies that are somewhat probably not necessarily First Amendment compliant. If there's, I guess this would violate, is just defacement. Like if students are going around and, spray painting Nazi swastikas on Jewish students' dorms, yeah, their campus should do something about that, and it should investigate and discipline the people
You should be expelled for doing that. You should be expelled.
I don't think anyone's saying otherwise.
Yeah.
Right. So I will note that nobody is making an accusation of that kind. I think it's perfectly fine if you want to characterize, if you want to take the view that the kind of activism you're seeing from the pro-Palestinian side is anti-Semitic, you have the free speech right to make that claim. You just have to be a participant in that. You can have your protest that says they're anti-Semites. They can have their protest that says you're genocidal. Like, that's what the college campus is. It's where heated rhetoric is taking place and political organizing, and that's the way it's supposed to be. And there's no safety and protection for that. If it goes beyond that to people are being violently threatened, or they're facing violence, or they're facing property defacement, or they're facing harassment of the nature that they're not allowed to speak, where you have an event where where a Jewish person or a Palestinian person is supposed to speak, and then the event gets canceled because people turned off the lights or disrupted it. You can't do that either. So there are very clear rules. There's actually nothing to argue about because these rules have been adjudicated over and over again. Those of us who pay a lot of attention to the campus speech issues know, there's an advocacy organization, FIRE, that swoops in if it gets violated and explains to the university why they can't do X and they have to do Y. So I've been down this road. We've been down this road so many times. There's not a lot of new to debate over what's allowed and what's not. A lot of speech and behavior that might make you uncomfortable is in fact allowed, and we got to be super against giving license to authorities, or especially the government, to sanction more of it. They don't have that authority. Yeah. They lack that authority.
And in fact, what's interesting when you get to this Bill Ackerman stuff, there's a lot of stuff that I think that supporters of RFK Jr. wouldn't co-sign, and so that it is curious that RFK Jr. himself co-signed it. He argues that the Harvard Office of DEI basically is not sufficiently broad, big, or inclusive.
That's a red flag there.
He says that it does not specifically support Jewish or Asian or non-LGBT students. That feels made up.
DEI bureaucracies are, you're not a fan of them either. These are the most notoriously anti-speech organizations there are. The more bureaucrats you have in the DEI field, the more you're going to get legitimate violations of students' speech rights on all sides. You're going to get,
right. So the way Bill Ackerman gets to DEI doesn't cover Jewish people is that this is the quote from the DEI statement. We actively seek and welcome people of color, women, persons with disabilities, people who identify as LGBTQIA, and those who are at the intersections of those identities from across the spectrum of disciplines and methods to join us. There's been a lot of debates about this over the last 2 years, cutting in both directions, but didn't Whoopi Goldberg just get in trouble for saying that Jewish people weren't people of color? Do you remember that? Not a year ago?
Well.
So, I don't know.
If you want to say to me that...
And Asian people aren't people of color now? I don't know. It's just a bizarre statement.
DEI people do, come from the progressive side, and, criticism of Israel is obviously a big progressive issue. So I'm open to believing that there could be a blind spot in the DEI apparatus, but the entire DEI apparatus needs to be dismantled.
I'm asking the specific question. From that sentence, Bill Ackerman has derived the idea that DEI excludes Jewish people and Asians somehow from the experience. Going on,
there's a lot of discrimination against Asians on college campuses that has not been dealt with by. Harvard has a DEI branch,
right, and can we just stick to the point here is that this man is reading a very inclusive sentence and going out of his way. It shows the bad faith of the narrator here when you start to dig into it. Moreover, Harvard did launch an anti-Semitism task force in the wake of all of the protests and things that have been happening since October 7th. And his complaint about that is that not enough people knew about it. So they did something, but because, I don't know, maybe there's not that much community need for it, people weren't talking about it enough, his daughter maybe hadn't heard of it, and that's what he's basing this on. He said that it wasn't big enough, it needs to be publicized more. The whole thing, and when I say this has to be at least a 2,000-word Twitter post. It reeks of the kind of grievance politics that so many conservatives for so long said were the problem on college campuses. It was all about snowflakes and the, what was the name of the something mind? the liberal, the Jonathan Haidt book.
Coddling of the American Mind.
The Coddling of the American Mind.
Yeah.
That was the whole focus of kind of the anti-woke, snowflakey crusade. And now the argument here is that RFK Jr. again co-signed is my daughter, who graduated in 2020, who says she never experienced anti-Semitism on campus, who said it was non-existent, is for some that background somehow is leading me to say that Harvard needs to ratchet up its DEI practices and crack down on the employment opportunities of students after they graduate.
I'm totally against that. But we can, when we call out this kind of hypocrisy, you can also show the other case, right? Like many liberals on campuses, a majority of them in multiple polls I've covered and written about and seen, said that free speech does not mean hate speech, and if you feel subjectively offended by speech, then the authorities have the obligation, the campus authorities, the bureaucrats have the obligation to make you feel comfortable and affirmed, have an obligation to make you feel affirmed everywhere you go, every day of your life. And that was a really silly set of norms to try to get enshrined. I don't know about that.
All I know, I'm a little long on the tooth now, but I attended Harvard for 7 years in total. And I never once asked to be affirmed or felt affirmed, and nor was it the expectation of me or any other my other black friends or students of color that the university was ever going to come and weigh in on our behalf. I graduated the year that Larry Summers made those comments about women in science as a woman in science, and we all just trudged through and got our diplomas and kept it pushing.
Well, no, but he got sacked over that. That's a famous example of someone getting cancel cultured, right? Facing the.
Sure, I'm talking about the experience of students on campus.
Right, I'm saying their experience was corrected by that. That was the action they wanted, right?
So in this letter that Bill Ackerman wrote, he says, I was incredibly saddened to say that Harvard has also become a place where Jewish students are concerned about the threat of physical violence, which is likely has a corresponding impact on their mental health, while among other insults, they are forced to sit next to classmates who openly and comfortably post under their actual names anti-Semitic statements and imagery on the student-wide Slack message system with no consequences for their actions. Again, no citations for what this anti-Semitism is. It's likely saying free Palestine. Now, in response to that, I said, I remember I sat next to a student who believed and argued forcefully in a property law class that stores should have the right to exclude black patrons if they didn't look right, if they just didn't have the right vibe. I sat next to a student who said that white people should be compensated by the government for lost housing value when black people move next door because of racism. Housing properties go down, and so white people should be compensated for it. That was in a poverty law class I took. And I went to school with Stephanie Grace, who very famously made headlines when she argued that blacks are intellectually inferior. She went on to a very prestigious clerkship on the Ninth Circuit and has been living a lovely life, I hear, since then. The black students, when that happened, not a single one of us called for her to face any employment consequences or be punished in any way. All we wanted was some of the black faculty members to sit with us and help us craft some statements and basically come to our defense. And that is the environment, that has been the status quo at these institutions. So it is really interesting to see all of these people come running and screaming about snowflakes. When my experience is that we weren't snowflakes, that we were made of sterner stuff and put up with a lot of stuff. Maybe it was stuff we shouldn't have put up with. But the idea that these were liberal bastions that were catering to our every need, hey, maybe that's what they became after 2011, but that wasn't my experience in college or law school.
Okay, but I've read, I don't think these demands characterize most students, but I mean, Brianna, we've seen over and over again the shutting downs of your Charles. I went to a University of Michigan event to cover Charles Murray speaking. The students, the event couldn't proceed. They turned off all the lights. They shut him down. That kind of thing happened to Heather McDonald and Christina Hoff Sommers and Milo. Remember that whole stuff? I mean, there was an endless parade of conservatives trying to speak on campus. Students, angry activist students, saying this is hate speech and can't be allowed to continue.
I really hear you. But I do feel like you keep straying away from this question of someone here is complaining that their student has to sit next to in a class, not whether people protest a speaker. That's a different conversation that I'm happy to have at another time. But this is a conversation about RFK Jr. signing on to Bill Ackerman's statement in which he says his kids shouldn't have to sit next to someone in class with a different political opinion as them. And that is dangerous. That is absolutely not what college is supposed to be about.
No disagreement.
Yeah. All right, stick around. We're rising after this.
And Israel is critical. And the reason it's critical is because it's a bulwark for us in the Mideast. It's almost like having an aircraft carrier in the Mideast. It's our oldest ally. It's been our ally for 75 years. It has been an incredible ally for us in terms of the technology, the exchange. And, in building the Iron Dome, which we paid a lot for, has also taught us enormously about how to defend ourselves at home from missiles. So those military expenditures are all going, 75% of it goes to U.S. companies under the agreement, under the MOU. But if you look at what's happening in the Mideast now, Iran is now the closest allies to Iran are Russia and China. BRICS, Saudi Arabia is now joining BRICS. So those countries will control 90% of the oil in the world. If Israel disappears, the vacuum in the Mideast, which is, Israel is our ambassador, it's our presence, our beachhead in the Mideast, and it gives us ears and eyes in the Mideast. It gives us intelligence. It gives us the capacity to influence affairs in the Mideast. If Israel disappeared, Russia and China would be controlling the Mideast, and they control 90% of the world's oil supply, and that would be cataclysmic for U.S. national security. So that's the answer to you.
And as soon as he becomes president, he appoints his younger brother, Bobby, as U.S. Attorney General, your dad.
Yeah, because my uncle had been on the Rackets Committee in the United States Senate. He had been in the Senate before he became president. And my father was chief counsel of the Rackets Committee. It was like a daring move for Democrats because organized crime had infiltrated organized labor, and particularly the Teamsters Union, but some of the other unions.
Yeah.
And they did it anyway. But my father really felt that it was at that time, he felt like it was the gravest threat to American democracy because the mafia had infiltrated all of these institutions that were key to our democracy, including the labor unions, but also the judiciary. They controlled a lot of judges. They owned a lot of Congress people.
Robert F. Kennedy Jr. says he flew on Jeffrey Epstein's Lolita Express. This was something that was revealed back in 2021, but since he's now running for president, it's really come out and people are focusing on it. So this Newsweek article came out just the other day. Exclusive, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. says he flew on Jeffrey Epstein's Lolita Express. It goes on to say he has clarified the nature of his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein after it was revealed that the presidential hopeful had flown on the convicted sex offender's private jet. The independent 2024 presidential candidate was among a number of high-profile people who, in 2021, were named as passengers on Epstein's jet, which was often used to transport guests to the financier's private Caribbean island, Little St. James. Epstein's luxury Boeing 727 was derisively referred to as the Lolita Express by a number of media outlets following allegations that it was used to fly underage girls to some of the multimillionaire's properties following Epstein's death in jail in 2019, which was ruled a suicide. I like how they put it, which was ruled a suicide rather than Jeffrey Epstein committed suicide, because who believes that? Lists have been shared on social media purporting to show the public figures who had visited the island, which is located east of Puerto Rico in the U.S. Virgin Islands. We're going to go into what Kennedy had to say. Kennedy said that he had flown one time on Jeffrey. Actually, it said that this was a spokesperson. I want to clarify this. A spokesperson for the former Democrat exclusively told Newsweek that he had flown one time on Jeffrey Epstein's private plane. It was in 1993 from New York City to Palm Beach, Florida to visit RFK Jr.'s mom for Easter. And the spokesperson added that the private jet trip was made possible by Kennedy's then wife, Mary Richardson Kennedy, who was friendly with Epstein's partner at the time, Ghislaine Maxwell. Richardson Kennedy passed away in 2012. She committed suicide. Kennedy has been married to Cheryl Hines since 2014. Said Mary Kennedy Mary, Kennedy's wife, and two of their kids were on the flight. The representative said Mary knew Epstein's girlfriend, Ghislaine Maxwell, who learned they were going to Palm Beach for Easter, and they offered their family a ride. So that's the story coming from the spokesperson. I want to tell you some of the names that were listed in 2021 that had ridden on the Lolita Express. That would be Donald Trump, Bill Clinton, Kevin Spacey, Chris Tucker, Bill Gates, Prince Andrew, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., violinist Itzhak Perlman, U.S. Senator John Glenn, and former Senate Majority Leader George Mitchell. Now, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. was asked about this because this came out in 2021, this list, and Whitney Webb, who has been hot on the trail of what's been going on, everything Epstein, she wrote a book, One Nation Under Blackmail, her volume 2, and she talked to RFK Jr. about this, and he actually said he had ridden on the plane twice to Whitney Webb. He said that on 2 occasions he was on Epstein's plane that had been arranged between Ghislaine Maxwell and Mary Richardson. In one instance, the flight was part of a pre-planned fossil hunting trip to South Dakota, which he believed had been Ghislaine's idea, as Epstein had appeared to only have attended grudgingly. And then he also said that the other flight was the return trip to New York from South Dakota. The other flight was the one from New York to Palm Beach in order to visit Ethel Kennedy, his mother. And he said that he and Mary were accompanied by Kennedy's 2 older children on each flight. So both times the kids were there on the flight. Whitney Webb actually brought this up because the Newsweek report said that and the spokesperson said he was only on once. And Whitney was like, wait a minute. I'm more concerned that he told me he was on it twice, but now the reports are he's only on it once. What is going on there? So he actually clarified in a Twitter space. Listen to this.
I want to take this opportunity to correct a tweet that we put up yesterday. We were called, Stephanie was called and asked, and I'm on the road, so I'm speaking to her remotely, and a lot of times I'll talk to her and then she'll put up a tweet. We were asked about a 1993 entry from Jeffrey Epstein's flight logs that showed me on his plane, me and my wife Mary and 2 of my kids. Mary was actually pregnant at that time with Connor, my 3rd child. That happened over Easter in 1993, and I answered her that my wife Mary had known Ghislaine Maxwell a little bit, and Ghislaine found out this was Jeffrey Epstein's girlfriend. He found out that we were going to go to Palm Beach to visit my mother who lived there over the Easter holiday, and she offered us a ride. So I rode on that. I went on that flight. Of course, this is a time when nobody knew anything about Epstein and his shenanigans. I don't know if they even begun. This was 30 years ago. I don't even know if he'd begun all of his saga at that point. I'm sure he was involved in something bad. But there was actually there's another episode. It's the way that the tweet went, that Stephanie wrote the tweet. That was the only time I was on Jeffrey Epstein's plane. But actually, there was another time around the same time. I think it was a couple of months later. I went again with my wife Mary and my 2 older kids on his plane to Deadwood, South Dakota, to spend the day fossil hunting, to take the kids to Mount Rushmore and to Sitting Bull Memorial, and then go fossil hunting for a day. So we rode out there with them and again rode back, and that was the only time that I'd been on that plane. And of course, I never knew anything about what Jeffrey Epstein never. These things the same as everybody else did by reading them in the newspapers. Incidentally, lived in New York at that time and who were operating at a level where, like where I was, raising money for charities, for the water keepers and for Hudson River Keeper. I ran into a lot of people whose lives have since turned out to have a lot of very, very bad and disturbing secrets. I knew O.J. Simpson very well. I knew Bill Cosby very, very well. I knew Harvey Weinstein. I knew Roger Ailes, and many, many others. Oh, but you run into people in New York, and you have no idea, no way of knowing until it's revealed in the newspapers of Jeffrey Epstein with Whitney Webb, with an investigative reporter who was doing a story on him. So that's it. I just wanted to get that on the table, and then let's open it up for questions.
Okay, so he says there, I went on it twice. I just want to clarify that. Didn't know anything about Epstein and his shenanigans at the time. I've been friends with Bill Cosby, O.J. Simpson, Roger Ailes, right? He goes on and names. There's a lot of people who I know and have been friends with who've had, later on bad things, terrible things came out about them. Now, look, so he went twice in 1993. I'm going to say that people who we see a lot of people connected to Epstein. Maybe there's photographs of them at a party together, or people that maybe did take the jet, or the people that maybe visited his house for meetings and whatnot, because he didn't really have an office space. He conducted most of his meetings at his house. I think that for the most part, people connected to Epstein are not automatically guilty. Just because we see a photograph or we see a meeting or them appearing on the plane, it doesn't mean that they're automatically guilty. However, I get suspicious when the person has a connection to Epstein and they have an unwavering, inexplicable support for Israel. They just seem to be waving the Israeli flag quite a bit, and there's no real rhyme or reason to it, and they have a connection to Epstein. That, to me, then merits more scrutiny and more questioning, because many people believe that Epstein was, that the blackmail operation that Epstein was engaged in was a Mossad honey trap, that's what it was. And there's a lot of evidence to point towards that. So, and as we know, RFK Jr. has, like most politicians, shown unwavering support for Israel, even though it doesn't really align much with his messaging. His messaging has been very anti-war, and we shouldn't be getting engaging in all of this. Yet when it comes to Israel, he's been extremely, extremely supportive. A little uncomfortably so. I feel like there was a period of time where there were more photographs of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. with the Israeli flag than with the American flag, and that was pretty suspect when he was doing a lot of the parades and marching and doing meetings with Rabbi Shmuley. And here is Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Again, he's been saying we have to stand with Israel. We have to stand with Israel. He's been making excuses for their indiscriminate bombing, for the killing of children, even though he's children's health defense. He's been defending children and their health throughout his career. And yet now children are being killed indiscriminately in Israel. And he's saying, well, he's kind of shrugging his shoulders on it and making excuses for Israel, really touting the narrative line. And so that's really eyebrow raising. And then when you find out that he's been on Epstein's jet twice, it's eyebrow raising. Here's one of his tweets. I just want to point this out. This is the latest. He actually tweeted out, "Bravo, Bill Aikman. It's time to hold college administrations responsible for the epidemic of campus anti-Semitism by insisting on zero tolerance policies." So he's now insisting on zero tolerance policies. That's censorship that Aikman is calling for. He actually wrote a letter to the president of Harvard demanding a task force be created to identify students using slogans interpreted by some as being genocidal. And those are just interpretations. People are not calling outright for genocide, but people are saying, well, if you're waving the Palestinian flag, then you're for genocide. So he's wanting to identify students using slogans interpreted by some as being genocidal and to ensure that they face disciplinary action. He calls for a permanent mark placed on their records, preventing them from being hired by employers. He wants their Slack messages monitored for anti-Semitic statements and imagery, like, again, the Palestinian flag, and he wants students to turn each other in. And this is a tweet that he wrote out, a very long tweet, his letter to Harvard. And Robert F. Kennedy Jr. says, bravo, bravo, more censorship to combat anti-Semitism. And we want Big Brother monitoring and a task force and these kids' lives to be completely ruined. So, you know, he's got this unwavering, inexplicable support for Israel. We don't understand it. We don't really get it, but we know that he was on it. But again, there's a lot. I mean, look, I don't think that most of the politicians, like all of the politicians in the government, most of them support Israel. Do I think that there is some sort of Mossad blackmail on all of them? No, I don't think there's Mossad blackmail on all of them, but maybe quite a few, or their family members. And then there's other pressure that's put on by the Israel lobby. There's plenty of money, and there's a lot of threats to primary a person or to take their campaign down or to just trash them endlessly. And that is something that a lot of politicians don't want to deal with. So there's a lot of reasons why a politician would support Israel, unwavering support, give them all of it, anything they ask for. And that's what Robert F. Kennedy calls for is anything they want. But again, eyebrows are raised if you have a connection to Epstein, especially since Robert F. Kennedy Jr. at that time in particular in 1993 had a pretty sordid past. He was not the most upstanding character sexually. He admits to being addicted to sex. He called it his lust demons when he was married to Mary Richardson, who he was on the plane with. He had cheated on her numerous times. There was actually a diary that came out. The New York Post put this out, RFK's sex diary, his secret journal of affairs. This diary was found by his ex-wife that you see there in the photograph. He says that in this diary, he talks about grappling with his lust demons, but he also kept a scorecard of more than 24 conquests while he was married. He had codes for the women showing sex acts, 10 meaning intercourse. 1 through 10 is kind of depending on what sex act they did together. There were apparently in this diary 37 women named, 16 got 10s, so he slept with 16 of these women. Apparently in the journal on November 13th of 2001, RFK Jr. records a triple play, three separate encounters. Codes 10, so he had sex with one of them, 3 and a 2, whatever those are. And they occurred on the same day that he attended a black tie fundraiser at the Waldorf Astoria for Christopher Reeve's charity, where he sat next to the paralyzed Superman star and magician David Blaine and comic Richard Belzer, according to this. So, he was known for being addicted to drugs, for having a sex addiction, for not being the most upstanding person, and this was his second wife. So, there's questions there. There's questions there. Was there a honey trap plan? And that's a question I think that's fair for anybody to ask. So, especially if you're going to give unwavering support. Now, let's go into why many people believe that Epstein was a Mossad honey trap blackmail operation. We know that he was intelligence. U.S. Attorney Alex Acosta, when he was actually given his first deal, when they caught him and convicted him the first time, he was given a sweetheart deal, didn't really have to do, he got basically a slap on the wrist. And it was because U.S. Attorney Alex Acosta at the time said, I was told Epstein belonged to intelligence and to leave it alone. What intelligence? Which intelligence? CIA, Mossad, both? Unclear, but he clearly belonged to intelligence because the U.S. attorney was told to leave him alone and give him a sweet deal. And he got that sweet deal. I want to show you this video. This is from RT, and this kind of goes over some of the connection between Robert Maxwell, who's Ghislaine Maxwell's father, and Epstein. Let's go ahead and watch this.
You maintain that it was your employer, Robert Maxwell, owner of the Daily Mirror. You say that he was an Israeli agent, and as was his daughter.
He was not my employer. I would like to correct that.
Okay.
We worked together with him.
And you say that his daughter Ghislaine also, though, worked for Israel, and it was Robert Maxwell who introduced Jeffrey Epstein to Ghislaine Maxwell way before the 1990s, as mainstream media is reporting.
Correct.
I suppose what the most alarming allegations that you've been making are that the entire Epstein operation was a honey trap operation to entrap politicians, policymakers, celebrities, people in the media eye, basically to become Israel's assets.
Correct. That it became basically an intelligence operation to entrap different politicians.
So that's an ex-Israeli spy claiming that Epstein was blackmailed, or that he was blackmailing people in a honey trap, and that Robert Maxwell was part of it. Now, Robert Maxwell was given a hero's funeral by Israel. So this is one thing that points to Robert Maxwell actually being a Mossad asset himself. When he died, he was honored by the country. Many Mossad agents showed up to his funeral, and the prime minister of Israel at the time gave his eulogy. So he was given a hero's farewell as if he had done a lot for the country. And in fact, the prime minister who eulogized him said that he had done more for Israel than anybody would ever know. So perhaps that is pointing towards a Mossad honey trap operation, that Epstein was involved in that. Then and Ghislaine Maxwell, who was Robert Maxwell's favorite child and his biggest confidant, and that, you know, the dots connect there. And then Epstein reportedly commits suicide, and all the things line up for him to be able to do that, with the cameras and the guards and the fact that he had the right equipment at the time in order to even commit suicide. And on top of it, what gets even more suspicious is that the modeling agent who was thought to supply many of the girls for these wealthy people in order to blackmail them also suicided himself in jail before he could be brought up into court. And Ghislaine Maxwell, who is more, you know, is quiet and able to keep things quiet, apparently, you know, maybe they knew, maybe she doesn't need to be suicided because she's not going to talk. I mean, there's a lot of conspiracy theories out there, but conspiracy theories could be conspiracy truths, and especially when the dots connect and things certainly aren't adding up, and we're not getting the list of Epstein's clients, and we're getting very limited information. And there's perhaps a honey trap operation that is working for the very purpose of this time in Israel's history. If Mossad was blackmailing politicians or their family members, targeting their children, getting them in compromising situations, or targeting the politicians themselves or people in power, it is for this very moment. It is to gain unwavering support for Israel, to turn a blind eye to the things that they're doing, even though we're all witnessing with our own eyes the atrocities. Our politicians act like, it's okay, it's fine, it's no big deal, this is okay. Everybody just support Israel. And that makes us wonder, why in the world would they just give such unwavering support without saying, hey, maybe what you're doing is actually really wrong. Maybe we don't want to support this. Maybe we don't want to give you $14 billion for this operation. Maybe we don't want to help you push all of these people into Egypt. None of those questions are really happening. So there's a lot of eyebrows being raised, and a lot of questions, and a lot of wondering about these lists and the powerful people that are on these lists, and the possibility that maybe there was something collected on them that is ensuring that they all stand with Israel no matter what, at all costs. Don't even question it. And it's a good thing to wonder. I want to play this last clip. This is when I interviewed Alan Dershowitz. He says he's never going to be on the show again because he felt bombarded when I asked him about Epstein, even though we said in advance we would be asking questions about Epstein. But I want to play this clip for you because I'm asking him specifically about Mossad and this potentially being a Mossad operation. And this is what he had to say about Jeffrey Epstein. Well, many of us suspect that Jeffrey Epstein was an asset to Mossad, and that Ghislaine Maxwell was in fact an agent of Mossad. There's a lot
Totally
of evidence
nonsense.
that point to this direction, and that they were operating a blackmail operation in order to get very powerful people, including people like yourself, in precarious positions to where you could potentially work on behalf of the state of Israel or protect the state of Israel.
I've been working on the state of Israel. I've been working for the state of Israel since before you were born. Jeffrey Epstein once visited me in Israel. He had never been there. He didn't know anybody in Israel. He didn't work for the Mossad. The Mossad wouldn't hire him. And I hope he had videotapes of everybody, because they would show I never did anything improper.
And maybe Alan Dershowitz never did. He did write a book, The Case for Israel. So Alan Dershowitz is a big, huge proponent for Israel. And he says he'd been working for Israel for longer than I was born. So perhaps Alan Dershowitz is also working, maybe there is more conspiracy there that are not theories, but truths. It's unclear. But I do know that Alan Dershowitz has been very much defending, if you look back at his defense of who he's defended, there was after 9/11, the dancing, the men that were caught on camera dancing. It looked like they were dancing. They were Israeli citizens. And Alan Dershowitz was one who I believe went in and helped clear that up and get those men out of the country and back to Israel. And again, he's written a book on it. And so The Case for Israel. So there's, I think it's important for us to ask questions. I think it's important for us to, as I asked Alan Dershowitz, for us to be asking other people in positions of power or people who are vying for positions of power these questions. I think it's fair. If somebody sat on an airplane with Epstein, I think it's completely fair to then question and scrutinize that and not necessarily take their word for it. No one's going to say, oh yeah, I'm totally involved and I hung out at Epstein's house and saw some girls and had some fun. And no one's going to admit that. So of course they're going to say it was innocent, it was nothing. And we, the people, have the opportunity to listen to what they say, and we get to decide if we believe them. And we look at all the evidence and we connect all the dots and we say, I don't know. I mean, so ask questions, scrutinize. But right now, we are seeing a lot of support for Israel, a lot of unwavering support, and a lot of it seems to be very questionable, or it's how can these people actually turn a blind eye or believe the things that they're actually saying? It doesn't make sense. And if it doesn't make sense, it's probably because it doesn't make sense. And something else makes sense if you dig a little bit deeper.
She's back. That was Jill Stein. Welcome back to here to all of you to the Megyn Kelly Show. My guest today is Charlie Kirk. So, no one's going to vote for Jill Stein that we know. I don't think we know a single person is going to vote for Jill Stein. However, she matters. I mean, go Jill, go. You go, sister. Green. Green is the way to be.
I'm going to buy the shirt.
Right?
Jill Stein, right? Feel the Stein. I love it. By the way, I just... a couple takeaways from that video. People listening on podcast or on SiriusXM, I just want to make sure. She's showing imagery of the Palestinian protesters being arrested. That's a big deal for them. Understand that Jill Stein is going to get a boost because a lot of people in the Democrat base are pissed at Biden. There's a reason why she put that imagery on there, right? And in a state like Michigan, where you have hundreds of thousands of Hamas sympathizers, I'm not exaggerating, in Dearborn, Michigan, or in Minnesota, stuff like that can make a very, very big difference. So look, when you talk about third parties, it's very, very hard to predict, but you can look at trends. I will die on this hill, Megyn. I think RFK hurts Trump. I've said this to the Trump team. I see it firsthand. I think RFK hurts Donald Trump far more than he hurts Joe Biden, largely because Donald Trump is running a race of saying low trust of institutions, the DOJ is corrupt, the FBI is corrupt, the country's going to hell. RFK is saying that the vaccine companies and the pharmaceutical companies and the corporations are corrupt. So you have low trust of institution voters that are going to be competing for the same sort of candidates competing for those voters. Joe Biden is a high trust of institutions candidate where he says, hey, institutions are worthy of trust. This is the Joe Scarborough thing, right? Which is, how dare you question the FBI? How dare you question the military? What are you non-patriotic? Honestly, Megyn, what's incredible is Joe Biden's mantra, attitude, vibe, and messaging is identical to George W. Bush messaging in 2004. Identical. That if you speak against the military, you're anti-American. If you don't like the government, it's the same as not liking the country. It's very interesting to see this inversion happen. But then you have these other candidates, right? So Joe Biden's math gets messy when all of a sudden you introduce a Jill Stein. I don't know what happened to Cornel West. Did they buy him off, or did they like
So
threaten him
I
to
was
put him
looking
in
at
Gitmo?
that too. He's still
Right?
around. I guess he's no longer going to be the Green Party guy. Now he's going to run as an independent because the Queen of Green
feels like a blackmail thing. I got to be honest. He just
he's getting pushed to the side.
He was talking like, I know, he was like the good old soul, preacher, pastor, he has that vibe to him, Brother Hannity, we need to have a reparations and all this. And he was going to like a fight for the people. And he was doing all these TikToks. And then the Daily Beast comes out with a story. It's true. They say Cornel West owes 10 years of back taxes to the IRS. And he just kind of, backs away.
That's the Daily Beast's racism playing there. But listen, here's the fascinating thing about Jill Stein. We knew that she was a spoiler, but going back and reading just how big a spoiler she was is interesting, okay? This is from 11/9/2023, WAPO. In 2016, Hillary Trump, Stein drew 1.4 million votes nationally as the Green Party nominee. But Democrats accused Stein of being a spoiler in a number of battleground states where the race was close. Clinton lost Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin to Trump by fewer votes than Stein received. Had Clinton won all three, she would have been president. And think about it. I remember that anger. Like, it was such a tsunami when Trump won. It was like there was a gazillion news stories. This one was in there, but, probably didn't get as much attention as it normally would. Jill Stein, really, you could make the case she cost the Dems the election.
Yeah, and here's the amazing thing, Megan. Democrats use COVID as a way to keep the Green Party off the ballot. The Green Party was not on the ballot in 2020. So it was not on the ballot in Georgia. Yes, because they weren't able to get the signatures. So the Democrats come in and they sue. There was no Green Party in Wisconsin, no Green Party in Pennsylvania. So you could make the argument that if the Green Party would have been on the ballot, Donald Trump would still be president. So you can go an even step further. So now you have coming into next year, you have Jill Stein that'll be on the ballot. I professionally debate, let's just say, revolutionaries. I'm going to be really nice this morning, Megan. I'm on like 3 hours of sleep, by the way. I was at UCLA yesterday. It was really interesting. They do not like Joe Biden. They do not. And the more options that are presented that allow them to vote their conscience. I'm a young freedom-fighting voter. The better. What the Democrats did in 2020 was so smart. They created a European equivalent of a vote of no confidence against Donald Trump. Very few people voted for Joe Biden. They voted against Donald Trump and the pressure cooker that was created around him. COVID death tolls on CNN, right? Race riots, disorder in the country, panic, right? The kind of idea that the country was falling apart. And Joe Biden was just kind of a return to normalcy, return to unity. We all know that was a bunch of crap, right? But that was the way that was framed. And they had to suppress the Hunter Biden laptop story and keep Joe Biden largely untouched to make that happen. Donald Trump is much better as an outsider insurgent candidate than an incumbent candidate. That's my personal opinion. He's much better at calling out the flaws and criticizing an incumbent than defending a record. That's my own personal. I think we're on the same page there.
Yeah.
So now we have this thing where Jill Stein, if she gets the signatures, which the Green Party has somewhat of an infrastructure in Wisconsin, has somewhat of an infrastructure in Georgia, somewhat of an infrastructure in Pennsylvania, is that Joe Biden is now going to have to go to Dane County, Wisconsin, the home of University of Wisconsin-Madison, and convince younger voters to go vote for him. But honestly, there's other options. Some of the Rogan bros might go for RFK. The younger ladies might go for Jill Stein. The earth worshipers might go to Jill Stein. I'm saying that all of a sudden you're now going to see that kind of 5 to 6 to 7 to 8 point erosion. And then Joe Biden has a massive Palestine problem that's not going to go away.
Yep.
I have not seen a schism in the Democrat rank and file. And I do this for a living, Megan. And I'm just like, wow, I love to be shocked and surprised. I did not have on my bingo card, Gaza, splintering the Democrat Party.
You know what?
And
I have to say, my first thought on it, like after all the other thoughts, I guess it wasn't my first, but in terms of the electoral impact on what's happening in the Mideast, is maybe this will be the thing that'll finally lead the Dems to close the border. When they realize what immigration has done in places like Michigan and Minnesota, which is coming back to, it's one thing, they wanted it to come back to haunt the Republicans. Now it's coming back to haunt them. That's a totally different matter. Just ask anybody who's trying to get into the United States from Cuba. They see it very differently depending on your
right.
politics coming in.
They already had a problem in the Muslim vote with the trans stuff and the abortion stuff. They were on shaky ground, especially Muslim men. They might not be in favor of Republicans, but the trans stuff and the abortion stuff are completely against just mainstream, Muslim theology, regardless of anyone's opinions on that. And now they're on even shakier ground with the whole Democrat Party splintered over this. So now we look at this, we say, okay, what does this mean? Donald Trump's superpower is an immovable base. It's his superpower.
Yes.
Joe Scarborough said it perfectly on MSNBC, and he said it with kind of regret. I don't think things could get any worse for Donald Trump, and he's doing very well. Yeah, they kind of threw what else? You're going to throw another 700 years of prison at him? You trying to tell me that an indictment or a conviction in Fulton County is going to move his base away? No. The one that does pose a threat, though, Jill Stein will hurt Joe Biden. Cornel West will hurt Joe Biden. RFK will hurt Donald Trump, but that is movable. I think you can move RFK's numbers down a little bit, honestly, because he is a Massachusetts liberal who happens to be really good on COVID, and I have great respect for him on that. But I think people are going to wake up a little bit because he's
not good on trans.
No, he's not. He said, I'm going to be the most pro-trans president. That is a big loser for anybody that has been paying attention. So I hope we get the truth out about RFK's true loyalties there. But is this, and I don't know how deep you want to get into this Manchin Romney thing.
Yeah. Okay, so wait. Let me tee it up. So that's the other big news of the day in the third party lane. Joe Manchin announcing that he's not going to run for re-election as a senator, Democrat senator, though centrist, in West Virginia, which is the only kind of Democrat who can get elected statewide in West Virginia. He's not going to run again. He's 76 too. Why is everybody 76? Why? They're all 76 or 77 or 80, whatever. So he says he's not going to run again. It seems very clear he's getting ready to run with this third party, no labels, which is going to be on the ballot. And it actually will launch a candidate. And here's why people think it's not just a resignation. It's something much more. Here he was on Thursday in a video.
After months of deliberation and long conversation with my family, I believe in my heart of hearts that I have accomplished what I set out to do for West Virginia. I've made one of the toughest decisions of my life and decided that I will not be running for re-election to the United States Senate. But what I will be doing is traveling the country and speaking out to see if there is an interest in creating a movement to mobilize the middle and bring Americans together. Public service has and continues to drive me every day. That is the vow that I made to my father over 40 years ago, and I intend to keep that vow until my dying day.
If there is an interest in creating a movement to mobilize the middle. Go ahead with your point.
Yeah, so he's probably going to run for president, no labels. So I have on good authority here, Megan. I know some wealthy donors that are not as conservative as I am, but we're still on great terms. We're friends, and we've been friends for years. And they're getting hit up by No Labels. No Labels is doing conference calls. They're ramping up. It's real. So just so everyone knows in the audience, No Labels is a donor-driven project where honestly some of their analysis of the political landscape is rooted in truth, but it's going to be a money grab for consultants, the likes of which we haven't seen since Mayor Bloomberg's run for the office, where he spent $1 billion to get like an electoral, like a delegate in Guam, right, or something. Where like, what was that? He spent like $1 billion, and I think Doug Schoen made like 15 million. I don't know. Doug Schoen's actually a good guy, but it's like it was like we've never seen. Right? No, but it was true. I think Mayor Bloomberg spent like $1 billion to get like a person in Guam to say I'm a Bloomberg delegate. It was one of the funniest stories in the history of politics, how it wasn't like a Showtime, Netflix, Hulu documentary of, this former mayor of New York that spends $1 billion to win a guy in Guam. I still think it was one of the missed opportunities. It still could be done. Anyway, so this is largely going to be a grift for consultants, right? Let's just be honest. However, this on its surface will hurt Donald Trump, because Donald Trump's path to victory in normal circumstances is he needs to win over the college-educated suburban voters that are upset about inflation. They're upset about crime, but they want more nuanced solutions, Megan. They don't want necessarily the conservative position on all this stuff. They'd rather have a very agreeable approach to politics. Now, a lot of this is unrealistic, but it is admirable in some ways, I guess, to try to find, middle consensus, because that's the way that politics works. At the same time, let's take a step back. This could hurt Joe Biden in the sense where the Democrats, the new coalition for Democrats is skewing more and more college educated, more and more suburban, and less rural, and less Hispanic, and increasingly less and less with black men. The no labels mantra will be this. It will be highly nuanced, I guess sophisticated is a good way to put it, messaging on TV deliverables to college-educated white voters, specifically saying, why can't we get back to find the middle? That will not work with the Democrat base. They don't want that, right? The Rashida Tlaibs, the AOCs, and Joe Biden needs those people, so he's already going to lose those. And it's not going to work with the Donald Trump MAGA base, right? That's an immovable 40% of the country. It will work, though, with, for example, a typical Mormon voter in the East Valley of Arizona in Chandler or Mesa or Gilbert, right? These are people that voted for Jeff Flake. They voted for Mitt Romney. And they are asking themselves, can't we find like a middle way? That's going to hurt. I will say this, and I'm probably going to be one of the few people. I think no labels hurts both Biden and Trump. Where it gets very interesting, though, is that what if Mitt Romney runs for the presidency with Joe Manchin? Let's just say that's a thing. No labels.
Because that's one of the things being potentially reported right now, although no labels is not confirming that.
What if he wins a state? What if he wins Utah? What if he wins a state that has 6 electoral votes? That's not unrealistic. He's senator from there, right? A lot of independent type minded people. What if he could potentially win Arizona? That's where it gets really interesting, right? So is Joe Biden counting on the math to win Arizona, but it brings down the threshold for the Republicans. So you need 270 electoral votes to win. Utah has 6 electoral votes. Nevada has 6 electoral votes. It's Mitt Romney or Joe Manchin, they're not going to get to 270, right? But they're enough to play spoiler. But spoiler for who? Well, that's where it gets even more interesting, Megan. Take a state like Pennsylvania, right? So Pennsylvania, if you have 5 different candidates, Donald Trump by far has the most enthusiastic base of any candidate that will be running in Pennsylvania. So if you have Jill Stein that gets 2% and Cornel West that gets 2% and Manchin and Romney that get 8% and Donald Trump gets 38% and Joe Biden gets 37%, that's just some rough math off the top of my head. Well, now all of a sudden you're looking at Donald Trump being president, or as I mentioned before the break, nobody gets to 270. And that means it will go to the U.S. House of Representatives. And then it gets really fun, where the House of Representatives decides the president, but each state gets 1 vote. So each state votes as a delegation. So Wyoming gets the same vote as California. And in the current composition, Republicans have a 2-seat edge in that way. That would what would they call that? They would say that was a constitutional crisis, is what they would call it.
After a crazy day of politics as usual, we all deserve an uplifting dose of plush perfection. And when I say plush perfection, I'm talking about the seriously soft, incredibly comfy cuddle blanket from Cozy Earth. Here's why you're going to be addicted to this thing, and you're going to want to buy it for everybody come the holidays. The cuddle blanket is a faux fur, ultra plush pile blanket that literally wraps you in a soft, warm cocoon of pure luxury. You just wrap it around you and the stress of the day melts away. The cuddle blanket is generously sized so you can easily share that warmth with somebody else. And speaking of sharing, it is perfect, as I said, for gifting. The cuddle blanket is double-sided, perfectly weighted, like a warm, comforting hug. Even draped over your sofa or armchair, its neutral color and faux fur texture adds a touch of warmth to any space. Elevate your cozy moments with the cuddle blanket. Hurry, save 40% off the cuddle blanket right now. This offer will not last, so go to CozyEarth.com and enter my promo code MEGAN for 40% off now. That's CozyEarth.com, promo code MEGYN. Hey, thanks so much for watching. If you like what you just saw, hit the subscribe button for more clips and full episodes.
But I did not know this. Last week, somebody tried to break into Kennedy's house in Los Angeles. And in September, somebody impersonating a U.S. Marshal showed up at one of his rallies. So the Kennedy people have asked for Secret Service protection and sent 11 pages to the Secret Service of the reasons why. And Biden turned them down through the Homeland Security Department. That's inexplicable. If I'm president, Why wouldn't I give RFK Jr., with the legacy of his family, Secret Service protection when he can document that this has some problems? Why? Now, we asked the Biden administration, it's gobbledygook. All right, well, at this time, not warranted. What's going on? I don't know. I'll find out, but I don't know. Thank you for watching the No Spin News. To watch the full episode anytime on BillO'Reilly.com, please sign up to become a premium or concierge member. Visit BillO'Reilly.com to sign up and start watching today.
New poll shows RFK Jr. beating Trump and Biden among young Americans in swing states. 34% of registered voters between 18 and 29 are behind Kennedy for president. A new poll published Tuesday shows independent presidential candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has more support among young Americans in swing states than both the GOP frontrunner and incumbent president. The New York Times and Siena College published a poll showing that Kennedy has more support among Americans under 45 in critical battleground states over both presidents Trump and Biden. According to the poll, 34% of registered voters between 18 and 29 are behind Kennedy for president. Comparatively, Trump, the GOP frontrunner, only carries 29% of that age range, while Biden, the Democratic nominee, carries just 30%. Among the 30 to 44 age group, carries 31% of support compared to Biden and Trump's matching 30s. However, Kennedy is trailing behind the two presidents in the other age groups, with the independent candidate's lowest numbers coming from registered voters aged 45 and above. At 20% support, Kennedy is heavily behind Trump and Biden in the 45 to 64 age group, who carry 41% and 31% respectively. Among registered voters aged 65 and up, Kennedy only carries 17% of the people polled, while Trump took 37% and Biden took 39%. Poll illustrates Kennedy's growing popularity with young Americans as he seeks the White House in an independent bid against Biden. Kennedy announced last month that he would stop campaigning as a Democrat and instead make an independent run for the White House. "Something is stirring in us, saying it doesn't have to be this way," Kennedy said, adding that Americans are ready to reclaim their freedom and independence. "I'm here to declare myself an independent candidate for President of the United States," Kennedy continued. "But that's not all. I'm here to join you and make a new Declaration of Independence for our entire nation," Kennedy said. "We declare independence from the corporations that have hijacked our government." Kennedy also said that he and the crowd assembled declared independence from both political parties as well as the mercenary media. Kennedy called for unity in the country and said that politicians getting all of us to hate each other is all a part of their scam. Kennedy was initially running as a Democrat in an intra-party challenge to Biden, but the DNC maintained support for the incumbent president and reiterated that they would not schedule primary debates.